Yo, it's Deminator_4 or Deminator What If. Let's move off of the video I was watching because that's not what we're doing today. I thought I've got like an hour left today, so today what we're doing is we're watching a video called The Entirety of NICO Bolas from Magic the Gathering. This one is by, I believe, Axelis. So I think this is Out of Magic. Yes, so this is someone called Out of Mana, Out of Magic. Doesn't seem to have done many videos, so has taken a little bit of break for like the past month, but yeah, these just makes variety videos. The Riftbound seems to be quite a few. I don't know if this guy does League of Legends content in general. I don't believe he does. I think he just does Riftbound. And then the other thing he does is Magic content. Anywho, sorry, some game optimization thing just popped up. Let me just close that off. Anyway, yeah, so we're just gonna get straight into this. Let me just make sure that everything's working. That's the wrong thing. Also, I have been spending the last couple of days getting back into WoWa. I have been doing NTE every day for like dailies and stuff, and truly I have to say WoWa is 100% better. WoWa is like I remember it being great like a couple of years. For fuck's sake, hold on, give me 1 second. Don't respond to me after an entire bloody oh, that's only been 3 hours. It's just someone talking about the Gen 1. Do you know anything about the Gen 1 Bulbasaur promo card for the anniversary? Basically, apparently the price shot up like crazy. And you know what? Hold on. Part of me was thinking I could do an art stream today. That's why my camera was wrong. There we go. Also, if my my face looks weird, it's because I was shaving and my beard trimmer ran out of battery mid-shave. So if anything looks scruffy than usual, or scruffy in a different way, that is my explanation. Just someone being hyped up about the new Union Arena. No, not Union Arena. Waste Schwartz. Some like new stuff for it. One could stop the inevitable universe beyond from invading all realms. Real. Alright, hold on. Let me just reposition real quick. I'm out of fucking water almost, but what? We've got an hour here, so I'll live.
NICO Bolas, arguably Magic's most iconic big bad and one of the greatest threats the multiverse has ever known. He was an elder dragon with...
I've not heard it. Like, to be fair, Magic the Gathering wise, when you like look from the outside perspective, like thinking on my knowledge of Magic the Gathering outside of like, the videos I've been watching and the cards I've had in hand, there really isn't anything iconic. Magic itself is the iconic thing. I don't know. I know people say that Jace is iconic and stuff like that, but coming in from someone who's just heard about Magic prior and then started playing it, Jace doesn't really, I don't know, come up to my brain. NICO Bolas doesn't come up pretty much at all. He looks cool. He kind of reminds me of the Source Dragon Emotion from Lego Ninjago, which is why I'm using a drawing I did of that as the picture, but yeah.
Total mastery over black, red, and blue mana, who had forgotten more about Magic than any other person would ever learn.
Forgetting more about Magic than anyone, that is insane. This guy clearly has some sort of emotion about him. Pun not intended.
Slightest touch shattered the minds of others who would be twisted and manipulated.
I'm a fucking idiot, hold on. There we go, fix. Yeah. Let's pretend that didn't happen. Alright. Back to the video.
Into falling in line before him. He was the Forever Serpent, the second son, the God Pharaoh. But before this would-be conqueror of the multiverse was any of these things, he was merely a half-sized dragon named NICO. Around
These fucking backstories, they're always like, oh yeah, this big bad who's like fucking massive. Yeah, back in the past, he was tiny. He was the Run. Man, fuck off. There need to be more villains nowadays who aren't the Run to the litter. Just because it's targeted towards a certain demographic doesn't mean it constantly has to be done. I will not be elaborating on that because, yeah, reasons.
5,000 years ago on Dominaria, the Ur-Dragon...
5,000 years ago. See, my sense of time is gone because I swear someone told me that the Brothers' War happened like 4,000 years ago. So this just seems like it's wrong timeline-wise. When did NICO BOLAS die? How long did he live? I'm confused.
Flew through the sky and shed countless stone eggs from its wings, which came crashing down to the planet like meteors. And in this way, dragons would find life on the plane. Almost every single egg contained a dragon within it, with the exception of one. One egg was special and housed two dragons who would emerge together, albeit half the size of their sibling.
Oh, it's going to be like one of those twin stories, and he's going to have his twin die at some point in this. Gotcha.
These two would touch Dominaria's soil together. They'd decide on their names together.
Is that why Dominaria is such a big plane? Because that everything seems to revolve around? Because it is objectively the most unique in that sense? Or when it says planets, does it just mean literally planets within the domain plane, the Dominaria plane?
And almost immediately, they would witness the death of their sister, Marevia Sol, together. A very quick lesson that no creature was truly safe in this world, not even dragons.
Fucking knew it.
The brothers were Nicol and Ugin.
Never mind.
And after witnessing Marevia's execution at the hands of humanity, their...
See now, Ugin looks cooler, and I feel like I recognize Ugin. Is Ugin in Tarkir, or am I tripping balls? Ugin looks way more sophisticated and chill. Nicholas looks like a bastard.
Paths forward were set in stone. Nico was filled with rage because of the fear that this moment instilled in him. A fear that he hated and rejected with every part of himself. And so he wanted to retaliate to prove that this fear wasn't real. Ugin, on the other hand, convinced him that this was too dangerous, thinking that they should instead protect themselves, seek out knowledge, and find their siblings, and then find a path forward. And so the two of them would take flight together to see this new world that they were born into. A sky that stretched...
Ugin is just chill as hell, honestly. Ugin seems like a lad. I do feel like he's going to die or become NICO BOLAS' like biggest hater. Also, I see you, Alan, Mr. fucking... What's the owl called from Harry Potter? Hedwig, that's it.
To the ends of the world, dotted with clouds like mist that floated over rivers and vast lands filled with life. But again, the brothers saw things differently. Ugin took all of this in and was consumed by wonder, a passion to learn, to discover, and to understand everything that he could. But Nico looked across this beautiful landscape and only wondered how he could have saved his sister. To him, this wasn't a world of infinite possibilities, it was a world of hunters and the hunted. He didn't care about the knowledge he could gather, only the power that he could sum up to ensure that humanity never lost their fear of dragons, now that they were sure that they could be killed. These thoughts in mind, Nico would look into the sky and see a ball...
Oh, so it doesn't seem to go over this. So, unless I completely missed it, so his sister that he saw die didn't die of like natural causes or of like some random animal. It was specifically a human killing her, and they witnessed it. How did they get away? And also, didn't they just say there was only 2 dragons born? So how did their sister find them? I'm confused.
Of golden fire that soared above all else. A source of power with no equal that he would spend the rest of his life trying to emulate. More than anything, he wanted to become a second son that ruled above all. Soon, the brothers found their way to one of their siblings, Chromium Rule.
No, I think I just misheard it at the start. For some reason I took it as the dragon let his eggs off in like, or its her, whatever, the eggs off into like the cosmos, and they land on different planets for some reason. I just misunderstood that. I'm not going back. I don't want to. But I guess I guess it was more of just a they were on different continents or different parts of the world or whatever. So their sister just happened to hatch earlier and find them, I guess.
Chromium saw himself above the twins. He was twice their size, he knew his place.
Did I just fucking have myself muted that whole time? I'm just, in case I did, just going to sound like a broken record if it turns out I didn't. But essentially, I'm just saying that I misunderstood in terms of what happened with the dragon eggs. I misheard it as they were just sent to random planets. But it seems here it was more of just different areas of the planet.
And despite being born just barely before them, he understood the world already. Just by looking at NICO and Ugin, he could see that unlike the other dragons who had two names, each of these twins had taken one half of theirs. There was no NICO Ugin, and instead there was NICO and Ugin. And this somehow meant that neither of them could ever stack up to the great Chromium rule, or any of their other siblings for that matter. This idea upset NICO greatly, as he never wanted to be seen as lesser than.
And that's why he added Bolus to the end of his name, because he wanted to gas himself up. Got you. And I have a feeling that this other dragon's about to die for some reason.
Anyone. Soon the twins would find their way to their next sibling, Palladium Moors. Chromium had suggested that she could teach them how to hunt, however, she too judged the brothers. She scoffed at the idea of them hunting because of their size.
The Elder Dragon War, lad. Alright. Also, based on that little quick text there, she's got to go. The most vicious of her kin. Considering that includes NICO BOLAS, my goodness. That's just worrying.
Lydia saw them as so weak that she had left behind a beast that she had hunted and flown away. And while Ugin was quick to try this meal, NICO insisted on never eating someone else's scraps. He would hunt his own meal. However, he didn't want to go alone. Neither of them had ever been apart from each other. They had never taken a step without the other, or spread their wings and flown out of earshot. And so, when it came to hunting, the twins would do this together as well. Palladium Moors was a dragon that knew only hunting, but the twins could think of so much more. In fact, NICO would even reflect on the hunters who had killed their sister and recalled that they had attacked in groups. And so he suggested that they too use teamwork to hunt. He and Ugin might not have been the size of their siblings, but they also differed in another way. Every other dragon was alone, and they had each other. The next
alone, dumber, although I think I just got this proven by someone called, by Arcades being called the Strategist. Yeah, having another person really is going to help you. You're not like alone in this world, you're not your own creature, you are part of something greater, essentially. I have a feeling that his early life is going to very much be part of something greater until the Great Dragon War, or Great Elder Dragon War.
The thing that they came across was Arcades Sabbath, who lived in the Great Ring Wall. This dragon was...
Why would... Whatever.
...attended to by humanity. They seemed to worship him, something which surprised NICO. However, as the twins approached the humans, they began to panic. Horns blared, arrows flew towards them, and NICO was wounded. Not enough to seriously harm him, but he had been wounded all the same. His fear once again took over, and NICO retaliated. He breathed flames that scorched the towers. And
I genuinely feel like the guy's got to be missing some stuff out. I would have appreciated if he went into a little bit more depth and stuff on stuff like this, because this just all this is telling me is that humans, for no reason, decided to attack NICO BOLAS. That's all it sounds like to me. Surely something extra had to have happened here, because otherwise they're just attacking out of the blue. And when you describe it the way he just did, which is
over, and NICO retaliated.
Like, I don't know, it almost sounds like you're acting as if he's some sort of aggressor and he did something out of the blue or something, you know, super bad or whatever. But like, if you got attacked by anyone, let alone creatures that you're scared of, wouldn't you also retaliate? Like, I don't know, maybe it's just, maybe I'm mishearing something in the tone of voice. Let me just read this into it.
Flew towards them, and NICO was wounded. Not enough to seriously harm him, but he had been wounded all the same. His fear once again took over, and NICO retaliated. He breathed flames that scorched the towers and the walls, killing dozens. And it was then that Arcades would attack the young dragon, slamming into him and sending him flying. Ugin managed to take his brother away, but Arcades followed soon afterwards. When he landed, Ugin apologized, saying that he assumed the humans were used to dragons as they worshipped Arcades, but Arcades explained that not all dragons are the same, and even those who worshipped him knew they needed to be cautious. Again, NICO didn't want him...
Also, I just fucking forgot that. I am suddenly feeling like NICO Bolas, and maybe it's just this guy, how he, like, portrays the story, but he's not going to feel like a bad guy until, like, at least midway through this. Because honestly, everything that's happening so far, it's kind of valid. Like, this is just one of the ways you could react to those things, and given his circumstances, it makes even more sense. But like off rip, just attacking a dragon, and then you're trying to tell me later on down the line, oh yeah, they still realize they have to be cautious. Did none of them realize that when there were 2 dragons near them and they started attacking them out of the blue? And then did you not realize that could have happened when you attacked one of the dragons? Whatever.
Himself to be seen as lesser than their older sibling. And so, in the face of Arcades, he would don a second name as he approached his great brother, and from this moment on, he would be known as NICO Bolas. Bolas asked Arcades how he could live amongst humanity knowing that they had attacked dragons, even killing one of their sisters. However, Arcades had a different view on things. He said that humanity had just as much a right to live as dragons did. But unlike dragons, they worked together, something that he wished to show the twins so long as they could follow the rules of his colony. Bolas and Ugin would live here for years as humanity continued to spread around them. Walls built around an ever...
So essentially this is the Dominaria equivalent of, like, the idea behind Strixhaven. Not like Strixhaven itself, but just that concept of a community built around some sort of founding dragon. Got you?
Expanding.
Well, to be fair, Arcades could just not be the founding dragon. He could have just showed up and just been like, yeah, I own you people now.
Territory. Babies seemingly born by the minute and starting new lives which would prosper into entire families. Homes sprouting as far as the eye could see like trees growing in a forest. And it wasn't just this city. Trade envoys flowed in and out like the tide, a symbol of other nations beyond the horizon which were growing themselves. And despite how much hatred Bolas had for humanity when he arrived here, he fully immersed himself in their ways. However, each of the dragons present had a different goal for humanity. Arcades wanted to guide them to...
You got guidance, you got knowledge wanter, and then you got power wanter.
Peace.
I guess.
Ugin sought to learn from them.
So I guess pride, power, magic, pride, power, knowledge, I don't know. Avarice is not the right word I'm looking for. But I guess in a sense it is. No, not avarice. I guess pride, greed, and... what's the word? Wrath. That's it. Pride, greed, and wrath.
But Bolas wanted something else. He had found a new way to avenge his sister.
Actually, no, I take that back. I think Bolas is more of an envy. I think pride, greed, envy. The sister who was described as the most evil one, or something along those lines, whatever other word they used for it, is wrath. That's
humanity had troubles. These beings held emotions deep within themselves for years. An ever-growing powder keg that a simple spark could set off at any moment. And so he began to play with this idea and tested his theories. Using his mind-shattering touch, Bolas would convince a good man to stab his brother by playing them against one another. It was only a small action. He had made one human act in his favor, but now was the time to flex these new manipulative muscles and see how far they could really take him. And so Bolas flew off to take his revenge, and as he did, Ugin would follow for fear of what his brother might be capable of. Bolas had flown to the peaks of a mountain overlooking the tribe which had hunted his sister.
He kind of looks like he has a mohawk in this image. I know something serious is going on, but that is I don't know, just Mohawk Dragon just...
all of those years ago, and what he found was that she was not alone in being hunted. Several dragons had their skulls adorning the village gates. This vile group of humans had developed weapons, armors, and even magic as they continued to grow their population. And with this ever-expanding force, they had continued to slay Bolas's siblings. As morning broke, Bolas and Ugin were approached by their brother Chromium. However, the great dragon had taken the form of a human so that he was able to walk among them. He explained to Bolas that while he lived there, he learned that humanity wore their expressions like clothing. They could cast emotions on or off at a whim to meet whatever circumstance might benefit them most. But that wasn't their only form of wickedness. Apparently, the chief of this tribe believed that he had divine favor from having killed a dragon in the past. And because of this, he believed all others to be below him, and even...
I mean, to be completely honest, to be fair, while they were newborns, they're still fucking dragons, and you can see how massive they are. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I'm not surprised that one of them thinks that they have divine favor for killing a dragon, because that is a pretty divine feat as just a normal guy, as far as I'm aware, at least.
Saw many of them as slaves. Hearing this, Bolas simply laughed. In the moment, he thought that he would be disgusted by it, but instead, he was inspired. Strength and ingenuity were enough.
He was like, morally, I find this reprehensible, but personally, I love it. 10 out of 10.
To stand atop the weak here.
But to be fair, he doesn't even feel it morally. He just feels good about it. His face kind of reminds me of a goblin. Is that just me? Like, he's a big goblin-looking lizard.
Humans were not like those who lived under Arcades. Instead, their worldview was much more akin to his own. Chromium wished to punish these dragon killers by raining fire down on them, but Bolas had a more twisted vision. One that was inspired by humanity themselves.
Okay.
Sure, they could kill a small group of them, but humanity would still endure, even without this tribe.
Let me guess, he's going to enslave them.
But instead, they could turn humanity on themselves. Chromium was angered at Bolas twisting his thoughts and words to fit his own ideals, and so he flew off to seek Arcades' advice.
What? How is that twisting his... This is a guy reading the story. Things will not add up. Gotta remember that.
But when he did, Bolas and Ugin made their way down the mountain to meet with humanity. Bolas would use his magic to manipulate the leaders of these human tribes, sowing seeds of doubt, insecurity, and envy, which over time would grow and fester.
Cool.
He would explain to Ugin that humanity would easily do their bidding. They only had to learn where to stick their claw to get the response they wanted. And in Bolas's case, he would always get what he wanted. One chief's son would march into his father's garrison and kill him before installing himself on the throne. Another two factions would climb Bolas's mountain to try and eliminate the dragons after he provoked them, but this was part of his plan. He would trap them, surround them in a sea of lava, and force them to fight to ensure their own survival. And while their soldiers fought on the mountainside, Bolas would fly to their unguarded temples and burn their religious leaders to ash. One by one, Bolas would remove pillars of power.
Hey, I'm just fucking impressed. This is a really, like, genuinely, this is a dope thing for, like, what, he's like a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old at this point? It implies that they've lived for longer, but we know that the chieftain is one of the guys who killed... He implied that the chieftain was one of the guys who was there when their sister got killed, so you gotta assume the guy's probably mid-30s, mid-40s, you got to be peak ability to be able to kill a dragon. I can't imagine a 20-year-old would do that and think they're divinely ordained. So, like, you've got like a 30-year-old probably. So, give or take that they've seen families grow, houses be built, let's say 20 years maybe? I don't know, I imagine they're like mid-20s. That's what it sounds like at least.
Leadership and magic from these tribes, turning them against each other and whispering their deepest insecurity into their minds to ensure that things fell into place as he wanted them to. Ugin, of course, knew nothing of what was happening. To him,
What do you mean, of course? How does he not know? Genuinely, how does he not know? Like, genuinely. Can he not feel the magic being used? Can he not see what's happening? Is he fucking retarded?
Suddenly, these humans were irrationally violent and began slaughtering each other in a way that he had never seen.
Yeah, man, I've never seen this thing before. I'm not going to research it at all or check with my magical dragon powers that I obsess over because I'm like a knowledgeful dragon. I'm just going to sit here and chill.
In the past, but then his brother approached him, and just as every time in the past, he expected his brother to follow. "Come witness the end, Ugin," he said. "Come witness the beginning." There would be one final act of treachery. The only two remaining heirs of the Dragon Slayers were meant to be married in the morning, and so these were the last of the divinely chosen chiefs. Each heir held a claw from the...
Okay, you did not mention that the original chieftain is gone. You gotta be like this man, like... No, no, he did say that a dad was killed by one of the chieftain, the kids or whatever. It just wasn't obvious to me. It sounds like this plan happened over like a decade. It doesn't sound like it happened short, but then at the same time he described it in a really short way. I feel really confused. I feel like I'm going to have to rewatch this on my own at some point just to get a better idea of it. I'm not going to do that, but I feel like I should.
Dragon that their ancestors had slain, and while these were meant to be symbols of the strength of their bloodlines, Bolas would make them each stab each other in the heart with these claws, all before he finally revealed himself to humanity and demanded that they bow before their new ruler. Bolas had attained his revenge. But more importantly, he had experienced the pleasure of conquest.
Okay, don't care. What if they just kill him? Like, genuinely. These guys are built for dragon killing. Sure, you killed their chieftains, but couldn't they just attack you at any point? He has his mind magic. I don't know how good it is or effective it is when it's happening right in front of someone, though. I'm sure
of dominating those below him and demonstrating his own genius. And so he wouldn't just be satisfied ruling over a few tribes. In this moment, he would look at the horizon and decide that all of Dominaria would have to fall before him. Bolas would turn to his twin and try to convince him to join him in this effort. With their magic, they could easily rule this plane uncontested. Not even their siblings could stand against them. He would even go so far as to try to use his mind-warping magic on his brother to ensure their allegiance. However, for the first time in his life, this failed. Possibly because these two shared one spirit, Ugin was able to resist his brother's magic. Not only that, but in seeing his brother try to take control of him, Ugin realized that he was nothing more than a plaything to Bolas. They were not equals, they were not partners. Ugin was just a tool that could be used for his brother to achieve his own goals. And with that realization, his heart broke. He was so crushed by this reality that something inside of him ignited like a spark. For a moment, his entire body and mind turned against itself.
Okay, the moment he said that, I was just like, okay, he's got a Planeswalker spark. So that's where the Planeswalker comes in. I wasn't expecting it so fast, I can't lie. But that's a fun way to introduce it. I can't lie. It's also quite ironic that the guy who wants the most power and control doesn't become the first Planeswalker between them, but rather the one who just wants knowledge originally. I will say to an extent though, a lot of this stuff is kind of valid. I still think a lot of this stuff is kind of valid on NICO BOLAS' part. These guys made a sport out of hunting him, and he's kind of just returning the favour. There is that one quote of, if everyone blinded each other for every mistake they made, the whole world will go blind or something like that. I don't remember the full thing. If you took an eye from everyone if everyone took an eye for an eye, the whole world would go blind. Something like that. Like,
it felt as heavy as lead.
So like, yeah, maybe he shouldn't do it. He's doing it like to an exaggerated extent, but he did just describe it as NICO BOLAS and possibly most dragons. They hold on to things for a really long time, and it just gets stronger. So I guess that's where this is coming from. Well, I mean, I guess you would have thought it would have died down a little bit from seeing a whole city of them, but yeah, I really don't think that this guy would have actually cared much if his brother had just done it and like hadn't tried to mind rape him. Excuse my language, but that's basically what that was.
His flesh felt like it was being turned inside out, and a storm of wind whirled within his thoughts. But as it all began to overwhelm him, a flash of nothingness freed him. His mind went blank.
Whoa! Is that not Eldrazi? Is that the all-consuming Eldrazi? I forget his name. Crazy way to show that off.
Unfeeling and unseeing. And when he finally regained his senses, he was no longer on Dominaria.
There is no way that the first place he goes to has a fucking Eldrazi. I refuse to believe it.
He found himself over a vast ocean,
Okay,
staring at his reflection in the water. Ugin had become...
No, he's not staring at his reflection. He's fucking fully underwater there, but sure.
What is likely the first planeswalker in history. But in doing so, he had...
For real? I actually mean the history of Dominaria, because there's no way it's the history of the entire multiverse of Magic.
Left Dominaria and
the first planeswalker in the history that we've seen of Magic, I guess is what... I'm just fucking with my words here. Although I will say, I wouldn't be surprised if the guy who made the original world for Phyrexia was the first planeswalker, or at least one of the early ones. I wouldn't be too surprised. I didn't mean to double click. Oops.
By extension, left his brother unchecked. And so Bolas was free.
I mean, I guess it's not really his job to stop his brother. It is unfortunate that that Bolas took over the entire realm of Dominaria more than likely during this absence, but it's tough, but he's a planeswalker, so automatically he reigns above NICO Bolas.
To fully explore his thirst for conquest as Dominaria's second son.
Also, is he not even questioning slightly that his brother just fucking vanished in front of him?
Before we continue though, real quick, a huge thank you to our Patreon, where members like Queso support the chat video. Bolas was a just and fair ruler whose reign brought order, peace, and so began the Elder Dragon War. Despite what you might imagine, Bolas was a just and fair ruler whose reign brought order, peace, and a legend of dishonorable dragon hunters who once ruled but were executed for reaching beyond their station. But dragons are bred from envy, and the longer that he ruled, the more dragons were born outside of his kingdom. Eventually, they swarmed longer that he ruled, the more dragons, but dragons are bred from envy. And the longer that he ruled, the more dragons were born outside of his kingdom. Eventually, they
from envy. I thought they were born from that big dragon from before.
Swarmed together, and many of them raided his domain. He would try to fend them off, however, as magnificent as he was, even he could not defeat a horde alone. But he wasn't alone. His subjects fought with him. Proud warriors and powerful sorcerers who would battle alongside him. With these forces in tow, it was a slaughter. All but one of the invading dragons were killed, and for the first time since he had become king, Bolas felt something intoxicating. But this was on a level he had never experienced before. What a sensation it was to dominate.
He really looks like a goblin, or like a frog, or something. I'm sure it's intentional to show how ugly he is on the inside, but oh god, it is funny.
Not just
this
those
massive
lesser
dragon
beings.
who's basically just the lowest life form in all of fantasy, bar like a slime or something.
Things like humanity, but even the great and powerful dragons. It fulfilled him so deeply that even seeing that final dragon soar away flooded Bolas with bloodlust, and he ordered his soldiers to hunt them down. They chased the dragon back to the lair of Bolas's most aggressive and monstrous cousin, Vivictus Asmondi. And here they found his three brothers, Lividus, Ravis, and Rubra, all of whom insulted Bolas, calling him runt and demanding that he flee if he wanted to live. But Bolas was not that fledgling quick to anger that he was.
I think they're finna die. I low-key don't think they're gonna live for much longer. But go off.
All those years ago. At least not.
You know, he kind of reminds me of Ripjaws from Ben 10.
Publicly. In private, he would behead several of his generals who had allowed the dragon to escape, but this rage was quickly focused. He promoted new soldiers, reorganized his army, and created a force.
I love the prince being on him and then equally being on top of the dragon.
Much stronger than what had stood before. Slowly, Bolas's army took control of the fight, but then an idea crossed the king's mind. He thought back to using his magic on Ugin, how his corruption had failed to influence his brother. But what if it was not his spell that failed, but his brother who had been special? They shared the same blood after all. Ugin must have some potential for greatness. And so, when Vivictus sent...
Again, did he not see him disappear in front of him? I would have assumed automatically there's something special going on, but... Alright. Does he think that Ugin just ran off? Like, is it just that this guy poorly explained it and actually there was an in-between bit where Ugin just kind of just fucked off at some point?
Lividus ahead of his brothers, Bolas called to him. He saw the dragon's insecurity and asked his cousin how awful it must be for Vivictus to always send him and his siblings ahead to fight his battles for him, to risk their lives while he sit in safety. And for just a moment, Lividus hesitated. And that's all that Bolas needed to know that he had won.
He was like, my magic works. Ooh. My voice. Oh, my magic works, honey boy.
He continued to press and twist his deceitful words until Lividus turned to attack his own ally in Bolas' stead. Still a pawn, but for a new king. This wouldn't be enough to stop Vivictus, though. So while he was distracted, Bolas fled to Palladia Mors to make her aware of their chance.
I love these fucking, like, coloured glass arts. Stained arts, that's it? Stained glass arts. Big fan of it.
To defeat this great cousin of theirs.
Cool.
And again, Bolas was amazed at how easily he could manipulate those around him. Even the mighty Chromium and the wise Arcades would be dragged into this plane-wide war, but in the end it was Bolas who emerged victorious, with only Arcades left standing between him and his true supreme reign. The great dragons battled, and Bolas had nearly forced Arcades to retreat, but then Ugin returned and stopped the fight. Bolas had thought that his brother had been killed by some spell all those years ago, but suddenly, here he was.
Okay, that feels... Just a quick thing, that feels stupid that he thinks that some random spell took him out. You see someone... Because, like, they have... Am I overestimating magic in... magic dragons? And dragons in magic? Like, am I just overestimating it to hell and back? Because... my understanding of dragons is they are, like, might personified. That's what dragons are. I believe that's what the original word for dragon was meant to mean. It was just, like, unparalleled might. And usually they're beings of really powerful magic and complete control over it. Or at least something else. And we know that, you know, these guys are really closely connected to it. So how come he wasn't able to feel that his brother just phased out, removed himself from reality to such a like unparalleled extent? I don't know, man. I wouldn't assume it's a random spell. See, if you told me it was that he thought his brother just left, because actually there was a space between those times and Ugin ran away, essentially, then okay, fair enough. But specifying a random spell implies that he just thought Ugin got hit by something and then that's how he disappeared. I feel like that's just stupid.
While Bolas couldn't believe it at first, he soon realized that his brother had actually returned, and so he would allow Arcades to flee and take Ugin on a tour of Dominaria as he boasted the whole way. At the core of his being, Bolas believed that Ugin had become jealous of him for outgrowing all the judgment of their sibling.
As I said before, Arcadius is pride. NICO BOLAS is envy. That's why he's so assuming that other people will achieve envy, because he himself is the embodiment of envy. And then Ugin is, rather than envy, he is greed. Not a greed for things, but a greed for knowledge, information, magic, that sort of stuff, I'm gonna guess.
However, Ugin instead saw all of this as insignificant. Here, his brother was talking about the smallest corners and the greatest plains of this world as though they were something special. But
and he's like, man, I've been around the fucking multiverse. I've been everywhere. I am everything. Like, why would I even care about that?
Ugin had spent all this time seeing just how great...
Again, because we're not given values of how much time is happening, I can only assume that the Dragon War occurred. It could have occurred anywhere between like a month to a year to decades. I have no fucking idea.
And vast the universe truly was.
With dragons, I would assume it's been like a century, but... And that would make sense why no one really remembers him, but at the same time, I don't know. That just feels... time is really weird in this one. I would have liked like a disclaimer at the start just to say, like something like from, you know how in League of Legends, all the stuff that's pre a Void War is really abstract and, you know, intentionally so, and in the like lore information people were given because of the fact that there was a massive war that caused people to lose lots of knowledge. It would be really nice if there was a disclaimer of, hey, this was really far in the past of Dominaria's history, so there's not much information. Also, Dominaria is a really similar name to that one the one city in League of Legends. Why do I think it's called the same fucking thing? Do they have the same name? Hold on.
How many other worlds there were. How small Dominaria was in comparison. And in finding out that there was so much more than this tiny slice of reality, suddenly even Bolas's hard-fought victory was not enough. His brother was looking down on him for his limited scope of the world, and he wouldn't have it. But as he turned to scold Ugin, he found nothing. His brother was gone again. Bolas, the dragon who claimed himself to be the second son, the light of...
That's crazy. He basically just said, nah, you're so fucking irrelevant. I'm just not gonna deign to tell you that I'm disappearing.
The world, bringing in an age of warmth, for the first time felt cold. Abandoned. His brother had arrived just to flaunt magic that he would not share, just to insult his life's work.
I mean, very clearly this is just a personal opinion. Give me a fucking second. What is she from? Noxus is what is what I was thinking of, because it's all red and stuff, but it's not the right one. Give me like 5 seconds. Who's a person from the other group? Garen, I think? Demacia. Dominaria, Demacia. You see my thought process. Do you think that League of Legends got a bunch of inspiration from Magic? I wouldn't be surprised. They do have a very similar vibe.
Just to leave once again, like Bolas didn't matter at all.
Well, it doesn't matter, at all, does he? I'm assuming at some point NICO BOLAS becomes like a full-on planeswalker, because I swear he was in the story. It was either him or Ugin who was in the story of the three main planeswalkers who stopped the Eldrazi invasion.
That coldness quickly turned into rage, and that rage ignited a spark deep within the great dragon, and suddenly...
Oh, fuck off, you can't be serious. Lad, you can't be serious. I thought he was showing off... Okay, so this is when he becomes a planeswalker. Are you fucking serious?
He was no longer on Dominaria. Like his brother, Bolas was a planeswalker.
It's not too surprising because they're twins, but...
He would travel to hundreds of planes in search of others with this ability, but no matter how many he visited, he found nothing. But suddenly he understood what Ugin had meant, and he began to search for his brother instead so that they could share this glory with each other. However, he couldn't find his brother, and after countless years passed, he returned to Dominaria. By the time he arrived, everything had changed. The courses of rivers had altered, islands had sunk below the sea, lakes had run dry. It was a whole new world, and the only remnants of the plane he had once ruled were the other Elder Dragons: Chromium Rule, Arcades Sabbath, Palladium Ors.
Okay, when you say that, it better not be like a fucking century, because that sounds like millennia worth of time. That sounds like it's been like 1,000 years, maybe longer.
And Vivictus as
No, it sounds like it's been like 2,000 plus years. For everything to change like that, islands to sink, things to rise, on such a scale where it feels like an entire world has changed, millennia.
Bolas went to speak to Arcades, who boasted...
Although, yeah, technically it could happen in a century. Not likely.
...of the vastness of his empire in Bolas's absence. A scene that was pretty similar to Bolas bragging to Ugin the last time they were on Dominaria. And like his brother, Bolas now knew just how small this world was. But even so, there was nothing that Bolas loved more than manipulating others. And so, as he heard Arcades talk about how much of a greater ruler he had become than Bolas ever was, Bolas would lean in and whisper a seed of doubt into his brother's mind. Sure, he had built this kingdom full of humans, but what if they were simply biding their time? What if these humans continued to spread until their numbers could overwhelm...
Also, I swear to God, I can't unsee that fucking meme of the guy pointing behind him. Also, a lot of these Seeds of Doubt things, he has to be using magic every single time, because otherwise it wouldn't fucking work. Like, the response would just be, I don't really give a shit half the time.
Bolus suggested that he send agents to every corner of Dominaria to investigate his subjects just to be safe. He could even offer rewards for turning in traitors and handsomely pay those who betrayed their own kin. And if all else failed, he could always burn down entire cities that might oppose him. These ideas would become a cancer in Arcades' mind, which would always remain to needle at the back of his thoughts no matter how much time had passed. Now that he was infected by Bolus's poisoned words,
it's gotta be fucking magic, because there's no way that these words could stick so hard, unless it's because he's a dragon. To be fair, it could also be that I'm just autistic as shit, and I'm not, like, properly... My brain just doesn't connect things in the same way. So it could just be that these are the sorts of things that do trap people's minds normally.
the Planeswalker could leave Dominaria with a smile, knowing
one autistic dragon could make this all fall to the ground, or it's ADHD. Whatever it is that makes me weird.
it was only a matter of time until this great kingdom fell. Bolus then traveled to a plane he called the Meditation Realm. And here, he finally found Ugin.
That's gotta be fucking Ugin under the water. That's not Bolus, because Bolus has a little circle here.
But his brother had changed. He had realized that Bolus was a plague that would contaminate the multiverse, and as such, he needed to be stopped, and so they began to fight. The battle would go on for days.
You finally see your brother, and he's just like, you gotta go.
Years, even generations, as they plummeted through plane after plane until they traveled full circle back to the Meditation Realm. And here, Bolus would ultimately take his brother's life. Ugin would fall and crash into the waters below them. The ocean's waves became furious and seemed to never end, extending beyond the Meditation Realm itself and into the blind eternities, and as a result, Bolus would be flung as well through nearly 100 planes before he landed back on Dominaria on the island of Madara. Eventually, Bolus would return to the Meditation Realm, where he found the Spirit Gem. He didn't quite know what it was, but it clearly had a strong tie to this realm, so he would wear it between his horns as a symbol of his supremacy.
Gotcha.
Back on Madara, Bolus would live on until a demonic planeswalking Leviathan appeared. The first other creature that he had come across that could jump between planes,
So was it originally just larger That doesn't make sense to me, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know how planeswalker sparks work, but you'd think that they'd be more of a little guy thing. But I guess you have to live long enough to feel that amount of change while having the spark. It doesn't make sense though, because logically speaking, you'd see a lot more planeswalkers by just working with smaller lived species. Sorry, smaller species that like breed more. I forget what the word for it is. But there's specific types of species which they breed very infrequently and live long versus species that breed very frequently and live way shorter lifespans. Usually it's those, I would assume it's those ones that would have genetic changes, not the big ones. So it's kind of weird that there's planeswalker sparks are so much more, based on this, more common with bigger species. That doesn't... I mean, later on humans clearly become more common in planeswalkers, but still weird to me. You think that way more goblins would become planeswalkers, for example, or ratkin or something like that?
Self or Ugin. Ultimately, the dragon and the Leviathan battled for an entire month and destroyed nearly 2/3 of Madara. However, from this destruction came creation, and the first temporal rift was opened. Bolus would feast on the defeated Leviathan for an entire year, leaving...
I have no idea what the temporal rifts are. I've actually forgotten. I assume it's just something that you can use to go back in time.
Only a few bones behind, which would form the Talon Gates of Madara. This would be his ultimate trophy to relish in his victory. But he would gain more than just something.
This motherfucker loves his trophies and relishment of victory.
To look at. By feeding on the Leviathan, Bolus would gain its strength and become more powerful than he had ever been. As time continued to pass, Bolus would begin to look away from Dominaria. He had already dominated this plane, and now that he knew that there was so much more laying in wait for him, he would start his ultimate conquest of the multiverse. Wherever he went, Bolus would sow discourse and leave nothing but destruction in his wake. Optimistically, he would gain knowledge and insight from these new worlds, but even if he couldn't, he would at least be able to show off his incredible power by bringing them to ruin. This wandering of the multiverse would continue for thousands of years, but...
I wouldn't be surprised if stuff like Ugin and NICO having travelled so many realms is actually like if the sparks are something that aren't natural and something that's like a virus almost. I wouldn't be surprised if they're the reasons why it spread. Would not be surprised at all.
While he was away, the brothers' war between Urza and Mishra would result in the creation of the Shard of 12 Worlds, an interconnected set of planes which were sealed off by an aura that would prevent planeswalking into or out of them. And as a result, he could no longer return to Dominaria. And so, Bolas would wait. He'd continue to gather more information, gain more power, and create great civilizations which worshipped him as though he were a god, while at the same time wiping out any who opposed him or refused to bend their knee. In opposition to this spread of chaos was a being of order, Ravnica's planeswalking Perun, the Sphinx Azor. While the two would never actually...
You say Planeswalker, but that clearly says Legendary Creature Sphinx. I don't know why you wouldn't just show the Planeswalker version. That's making me confused. I don't like it. But okay.
Actually fight directly, they did compete to spread their influence over several planes, until eventually Azor feared what Bolas would do so much that he made a plan to imprison him forever. However, the Sphinx wouldn't be alone in this mission, as Ugin would work alongside him.
Well, didn't you just talk about how Bolas killed Ugin? It was a whole thing?
Yeah.
Firstly, what is that fucking headset? Secondly, yeah, damn straight.
Yeah, I did. But anyways.
No. Explain.
Ugh, alright. So basically, after Bolas killed him, Ugin was launched into the ocean of the meditation.
Let me guess, he becomes a spirit? That spirit, like, inhabits something or just locks in? And then, yeah, he just comes back to life, kind of.
But the lives of planeswalkers in this era were tied to their soul more so than their physical bodies. So his spirit was able to manifest into a body made of that realm's water, taking on a new life as the spirit dragon and vowing to protect the multiverse from threats like his brother, who might bring ruin to entire planes. We are dealing with a story about magic reality jumping dragons here. A resurrection once in a while is just gonna happen. We can't stop every time it does.
I don't think anyone was thinking that, lad. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know why I'm just frustrated right now. Maybe I'm Duriad right now. I don't know what's up with me. God. Today's just been a frustrating day. But I feel like I could say that pretty much any day for the past, like, week, so... Let's not dwell on that too much.
So anyways, Ugin and the Sphinx would use Azor's spark to create and fuel an artifact called the Immortal Sun. Once Bolas was bound within, Ugin would be able to remove him from...
It looks like the triangular arc reactor.
...existence. The plan was for Azor to sit in waiting on Ixalan while Ugin lured Bolas to Tarkir, eventually leading him back towards Azor, who would activate the Immortal Sun and trap Bolas indefinitely. However, Bolas was clever. He picked up on traces of Azor on planes which used to belong to him that Bolas was now conquering. Not only that, but he learned of Ugin's resurrection. As for Tarkir, this was a plane that was deeply tied to Ugin. Millennia ago, while his brother believed he was dead after first awakening as a planeswalker, Ugin shaped Tarkir into his own image, allowing it to develop and prosper for all of this time. It was Ugin's pride and joy, and it was the perfect target for Bolas to corrupt in order to hurt his brother. So, Bolas would travel to Tarkir while remaining hidden from his brother. Here, he found dragons being born from maelstroms created from Ugin's own energy. His brother had been creating an...
I fucking wonder why it's called Dragonstorm now.
...army to overwhelm Bolas the moment he arrived on this plane. But Bolas had his own secret weapon. He had found a willing pawn in the Khan of the Temur, that being Yasova Dragonclaw. He fed her false visions of a future where Tarkir was free of dragons, a time where the Temur would no longer need to live in fear of the beasts and could instead rule the plane themselves.
Now, why the fuck would you believe a dragon about that? I know it's in her dreams, but I imagine he's going to show up at some point.
Bolas explained to her that he only wanted to destroy his brother and his hordes of dragons, but he needed her power to do that. You see, Yasova had the ability to manipulate wild beasts, and with her at his side, he could challenge his brother without fear of losing. Bolas would emerge from hiding and challenge his brother to a...
His manipulation shit makes him such a wank stain, for one, but secondly, how the fuck does it work half the time? Like, I get it, manipulation can be a really strong thing. I get it, I've probably been manipulated hundreds of times. But, like, it feels like such bullshit here.
fight. A conflict so great that it was a miracle the plane
I love how his fucking square head.
survived at all. But just as
square
before,
vibes.
Bolus
His head
held
is
the
not square.
advantage.
It's like
Pushed back into a corner, Ugin would reveal his trump card.
Ooh, that's a really nice mystic scroll. Crux of Fate. That is beautiful. Destroy all dragon creatures and destroy all non-dragon creatures. That's fucking OP.
By unleashing a deafening roar which
Imagine
summoned
making an entire dragon deck and then popping this shit. That go hard as fuck.
all of Tarkir's dragons to him so that they could assist in killing his brother. While Ugin had an army, Bolus only needed Yasova. With all of these dragons gathered and ready to attack, Yasova sent out a command to the minds of each of them, simply saying to kill Ugin. His creations would turn against him and left Ugin vulnerable, and using this opening, Bolus would attack one final time, sending his brother plummeting, crashing into the ground and leaving behind a massive chasm. Once again, Bolus had defeated his twin. Even so, he was unsure that his brother would remain dead this time. So, 18 years later, he would return to examine the area. And here, he found hedrons on his brother's grave, though he couldn't really find any significance to them. What he did find was Yasova and her granddaughter Naiva. Curious as to why they might be here, he offered to give Naiva the reins to Tarkir if she ratted out her grandmother. But before this could play out, Yasova convinced Bolus that the site was being targeted by the immortal sun in an attempt to trap him. This was enough to scare the dragon away. Luckily for him, the Shard of 12 Worlds had been shattered, and he could finally return home to Dominaria. Well, sort of. The Time Rift, which had been left behind by the Leviathan, had tied itself to him, and as a result, he could no longer physically manifest on Dominaria without the risk of overwhelming and destroying the plane. To circumvent this, he would anchor himself to the plane's mana lines. He found a point on Madara where the black, blue, and red mana veins intersected, and used it as a focus. Once he arrived on the plane safely, he found a world which had long forgotten his rule yet again. He had become a legend lost to time on Dominaria, but he would correct this problem immediately. He killed the Empress of Madara, took her place, and built an imperial shrine where the mana lines met, so that he could rule for the next 400 years as the God Emperor of Madara. Here, Bolus would inadvertently create his own worst enemy. As God Emperor, Bolus often passed on day-to-day affairs to his chosen elites, such as...
And this is where we go back to Tetsuo. The main man Tetsuo. Hell yes.
As the assassin Ramses Overdark, who was a regent, or the imperial champion Tetsuo Umezawa from Kamigawa. Tetsuo was a nearly unrivaled master of blue, red, and black mana, as well as physical combat. And using these skills, he wished to protect his people from this new...
Side note, what's this weird effect this guy uses in every single video, where the faces look uncanny, there's this weird, like, extra texturing shit, I don't know what it is. I swear it's not a normal Magic cards, hold on. I don't have this card in front of me, unfortunately, because I don't own it. But, like, they objectively look different. None of the cards I have that, like, effect. I don't know if it's because they're in, like, smaller card form that it doesn't appear, but I don't understand it. I truly don't.
And so he would create a plan. He trained in the meditation...
Part of me wants to assume it's some sort of, like, AI cover thing, but that wouldn't make sense, surely.
Realm, learning all of its secrets and how best to manipulate it to his advantage. And once he felt he was ready, he killed Ramses and absorbed his power so that he could use it against Bolus himself. Seeing one of his own betray him, Bolus allowed his rage to take over for the first time in millennia. His spirit would leave his body to chase Tetsuo into the meditation realm, but in doing so, he made the greatest mistake of his life. In leaving his body within the Imperial Shrine, Bolus was unprotected. This created an opportunity for Tetsuo to cast the Meteor Hammer spell and completely destroy the shrine and sever Bolus's tie to the mana of Dominaria. For the first time in his life, Bolus was powerless. No magic, no plans, no sneak attack, and under these conditions, it would be only a matter of time until he was ultimately defeated and killed at the hands of a mere mortal. But Bolus's story does not end there. Due to his connection to the temporal rift, his spirit continued to roam the Madaran coast. He would be trapped between the material and meditation realm for nearly 1,000 years. Throughout this time, the rift continued to expand, and eventually it had grown enough for him to manifest into Madara once again, even if only as a shade. He adopted the alias Sensei Ryu and used it to continue manipulating others from behind.
Sensei Ryu! Oh, Sensei Ryu-sama! Oh, very nice. You gon' fuck them up. You gon' fuck them hoes up. Sensei Ryu. Oh.
Behind the scenes until eventually Venser arrived on the shores of Madara. Venser had a mutated plane spark, which Bolus took a particular interest in. And so he'd take hold of Venser's mind and use the Planeswalker's ability to bring him back into the material world by pulling a copy of his body from another.
That was a really fucking cool art. That was a really nice art. Who are you? Jen Ravana Tran.
Point in time through the rift.
Manatron is having a stream.
Cannot stress how much Planeswalkers used to be like gods and could just do whatever they wanted before the mending happened. But Venser was not alone though, and Joyra managed to buy time until Teferi emerged from the Time Rift as well and challenged the dragon to a duel. However, no matter what Teferi tried, Bolus simply absorbed all of his attacks, planeswalked away, or avoided them. And ultimately, Bolus would end the fight with his mind-shattering touch before ripping Teferi apart, which the mage survived. As the dragon held his head between his claws, Teferi explained that the stream of time was being distorted as a result of the rift, and reality was being pulled apart at the seams as a result. At this rate, it was just a matter of time until the entirety of Dominaria collapsed in on itself. And this is actually why Teferi, Venser, Rada, and Joyra were here in the first place. Luckily, Bolus understood how serious this issue was and would allow Teferi to heal himself so that he could continue to deal with the Time Rift. This man really meant nothing to him anyways. What he really wanted was revenge against the man who had killed him. And so he would leave Teferi and Venser to hunt down anyone related to Tetsuo Umezawa or those who had helped him in any way. A quest which
so this is one of the reasons why Tetsuo's family kind of fell off. Got you.
Which would bring him to Kamigawa. Here, Bolus would attack the Honden of Night's Reach and cripples the Myojin as she was the one who had sent Tetsuo to Dominaria and set Bolus's downfall into motion. Once he was satisfied with his assault, Bolus returned to Dominaria where he is ambushed by yet another planeswalker, Leshrac. Leshrac was planning to kill Bolus so that he could steal his power and become the strongest being in the multiverse. He had even gone so far as to approach the Myojin of Night's Reach before Bolus had killed them and taken their mask. With this tool at his disposal, Leshrac manipulated Jeska into helping him battle Bolus. But in the end, he would strip her of Phage's power and fight the Elder Dragon himself. With Phage's magic, Leshrac continued to attack Bolus, paralyzing him and stripping the flesh from his bones throughout the battle. As they fought, they shifted from plane to plane, Ravnica, Kamigawa, Mercadia, Ulgrowth, and in each location, strips of Bolus were rotted off and left behind. Eventually, they found their way back to Dominaria, and Leshrac readies a spell to kill the dragon, but in the last instant, Bolus turned the tables. His now skeletal tail impaled his enemy, and he explained that while Leshrac had a mask from Night's Reach, it was just an imitation. Bolus had secured the true mask when he killed the Myojin, and the real deal was infinitely more powerful. Hearing those words, Leshrac was filled with fear as he watched Bolus's body instantly rebuild itself in front of him. The dragon then used the true mask of Night's Reach to steal Leshrac away effortlessly and end the battle all at once. However, Leshrac would not stay sealed away for long. The Madaran Time Rift was still open, and Bolus would expend all of his defeated foe's power to...
See, I've seen a picture of this before when they're referring to the Time Rift or something like in a past version of... one of the past versions of Magic, and it looks really cool. No idea what's going on, but it's cool.
Seal it, killing Leshrac in the process. From here, the dragon returned to Teferi's group and explained that he had sealed the rift, but it was not the only one, and even despite his efforts, the rest of the multiverse was still collapsing in on itself. But that simply wasn't Bolas's problem. He believed that even if the multiverse did destroy itself, he still had a way to survive. And so he left the other planeswalkers to their duty and traveled to Amonkhet rather than helping them. On Amonkhet, Bolas took a particular interest.
I wonder if that's the reason why, you know, the sacrifice had to be made and it ended up with everyone losing their powers.
In a metal called Lazotep, which reacted to necromancy.
Would they have been able to stop it had he been involved? Who knows?
However, he was not warmly welcomed onto the plane. The gods of this world challenged him and worked together.
Hey, I remember Hastet from thingy. From Ether Drift, that's it. Looks really cool. I like the cards for Hastet and Ether Drift. These guys are all based on Egyptian gods, obviously. They're fun. I like
the invader. But as Bolas rampaged through their lands, he laid waste to their population. And with less worshippers, the gods' power began to wane. And ultimately, they were forced back to the town of Noctimun. As he broke through their barriers, Bolas would cast a spell which killed every adult on the plane so that none could remember a time before his rule. Not only that, but true to his nature, Bolas would use his magic to mentally warp and dominate the local gods and angels into subservience. Just like that, he had seized control, but it wasn't enough. He had taken over Dominaria in the past, but after leaving the plane, he returned to a world which had forgotten him, and so Amonkhet would be different. He summoned the mummified dead of the plane to raise the children that he had orphaned. He erected monuments dedicated to his own greatness. The newly corrupted angels of the plane would serve as agents to...
How come he uses... I'm assuming he's trying to show them as slaves, but, like, doesn't it still glorify humans in a sense?
Keep watch in his absence, and most importantly, he produced legends of how he created Amonkhet and a prophecy about his glorious return. He would then test the populace, including their previous gods, promising those who passed a true afterlife, while all others would be left to the horrors of the broken lands. And all of this would be written down in the accounting of hours. Everything was progressing easily, but suddenly Bolas hit a snag. To the dragon's surprise, back on Dominaria, Jessica had managed to save the multiverse through a great mending, which healed all the damage from the time rifts and sealed them shut. However, the universe would need to find a new way to balance itself, and it did this through changing planeswalker sparks. As a result, all existing planeswalkers, Bolas included, would lose their immortality and a huge portion of their magical abilities. Even so, Bolas was still a great elder dragon with tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, so he was far from powerless, yet at the same time, he was still a shadow of his former self. Everything he did going forward would reflect this desire to become whole again, to regain the power he spent his entire life accumulating that ensured no one could ever look down on him in the same way his siblings had after he had been hatched half a dragon. And so if it meant finding a path...
He's such a baby. Imagine being that fucking old and all you care about is getting back at people from when you were a fucking newborn.
Towards regaining his greatness, Bolas would take over the...
Also, my opinion has changed on NICO BOLAS. I don't necessarily care about his actions too much. I'm also just think he's a little bitch. I do think his actions are fucked up, and I do think they've greatly overdone it. But I think I can see how he came to where he is. I just think that he ends up being a bit of a little bitch.
The entire multiverse. To this end, he began planting seeds on several planes. Thoughts, ideas, agents, anything that he could do to spread his influence over developing worlds and powers on the rise. The next phase of Bolas's plan would bring things to a wider scale than ever, all starting with the creation of the Infinite Consortium. This was a mercantile organization that spanned between several planes, collecting rare and powerful items, and more importantly, exchanging information between...
Assume he's not going to talk about how that happens, but I guess they're just using those portal stuff so that they can actually communicate or some shit, because I don't know how they do it. They're actually in contact.
Between different worlds. But regardless of what passed through the consortium, everything was at Bolas's fingers. After leaving Amonkhet, Bolas would cross paths with Liliana Vess. She was old, tired, and desperate. Her body was withering away with age, and so she sought out the being that she believed to be the most powerful in all...
Ain't she the one from the original Strixhaven?
All the planes. NICO BOLAS. They talked about how planeswalkers were once gods, immortals who could live freely on any plane. And as she thought back to her youth before the mending, Liliana would grow angry at what she had lost. She was once nearly omnipotent, and now she struggled to stand up straight. And so, here she was, begging the Elder Dragon for a way to escape death. While he didn't have the power to instill immortality himself, he explained that he could set up a deal between her and 4 demons. She would be able to offer them her soul in exchange for the youth and power that she had lost. However, they were not the only ones that she would be indebted to. Bolas too would demand payment, though he would not tell her his price at this moment. Liliana would leave under the impression that if she killed the demons who owned her soul, that she would be set free, but unbeknownst to her, in the event that she succeeded this task, she would become Bolas's servant. Once the deal was made, each of them went their separate ways. However,
it seems like Liliana's a bit of a dumb fuck. Like, why would you... Do they not have, like, any knowledge about demons and dragons? You know, you'd think they'd have learned it by now, but... Oh well.
It left Bolas in thought. Despite still being magnitudes stronger than any other planeswalker, he was still a shell of his former greatness. He too wanted to regain what was lost, but he wouldn't be able to do it so easily as selling his soul to demons. And so he would travel to the plane of Alara, a world which had been sundered into 5 shards. Unbeknownst to the people of this plane, these shards were slowly moving towards each other and would eventually reunite in an event called the Conflux, at which point an unbelievable maelstrom of mana would be created, which Bolas planned to harness and absorb so that he could reach godhood once again. To fulfill this goal, he began manipulating the people from each shard. Their chaos would fuel obelisks on their shards, and in doing so the Conflux would end up becoming even more powerful than it...
I'm getting given information I have no idea what to do with it. Like, I don't know what any of this shit is. These aren't words... They might have been words I've heard before. I don't remember them. Shards? Conflux? What?
Was expected to be. To this end, Bolas would spread his corruption and his influence. First was Grixis, where power ruled supreme. Bolas would only need to demonstrate his own...
Oh, is Shard meant to be like the guilds, but free elements?
...superiority in order to win over those on the shard, giving them an ultimatum of either following him or being killed. He would then create a massive army of the undead risen from the Cataract Necropolis. The people of Esper were artificers specializing in Ethereum, so Bolas would convince them that their supply was running low and suggest that they might be able to find more if they invaded other shards. Jund was ruled by dragons and those who had power. The local tribes participated in life hunts, suicidal missions to kill greater and greater monsters, but their leader, Rakamar, was someone that Bolas took a special interest in. She was obsessed with strength, and so she was more than willing to accept his deal when he could offer her power in exchange for her servitude. Under his command, Raka began more and more dangerous life hunts, and eventually suggested hunting the beasts of other shards in search of even greater prey. Naya was overrun with wildlife and behemoths, while their advanced Leonin tribe of the Nicatl was ruled by the scriptures of the Coil. Here, Bolas would manipulate the mind of a Leonin called Marissi, and used him as a pawn to twist the thoughts and hearts of those around him. He would ultimately create a divide which led to a civil war and destroyed the Empire and the Coil they worshipped. Finally, on Bant, Bolas convinced the people of the Skyward Eye to push their ideals of law and order to the extreme, leading to xenophobia and fear spreading across the shard, and the thought of stretching this new mindset to other shards as well. Now, back to the Necropolis on Grixis. When the Artificer Tezzeret's spark awakens, he is brought to the Necropolis while Bolas is still putting things in motion, and immediately is thrust into a battle for survival against Bolas's monsters. However, he would soon be approached by the dragon himself, and would receive the traditional offer for power in exchange for servitude, and ultimately Tezzeret accepted. Together, he and Bolas would briefly travel to Ravnica and cross paths with Ral Zarek. At first, they offered to pay off his debt in exchange for his service, but he turned them down. So instead, Bolus shifted to another method. He took control of the Demir thought stealer Milena and forced her to infiltrate Nisix, where she could plant a thought into Niv Mizzet's mind. In particular, the idea was to have Ral create an interplanar beacon which could summon planeswalkers from all over the multiverse to fend off Bolus when he inevitably invaded Ravnica in the future. While Ral was not about to take orders from Bolus personally, he was more than willing to act for Niv Mizzet in exchange for being made Guildmaster of the Izzet League. This was a great success. However, Bolus's new ally Tezzeret would end up betraying him and usurping rule over the Consortium. When Bolus returned...
Man, I love this kind of art. I don't know what it's called, but like where they've got this like bluey metal shiny vibe thing. They have the same thing for Skarmory Pokemon. I adore it. I truly do. I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it's just like the blues, the use. It's just like this like... No matter what you're seeing, it's always used for like something a bit pointier, a bit darker, but it always at the same time gives this vibe of just like a childhood I never actually had, you know? It's just vibes. Maybe it's like, maybe that's the color I'd place. Like this sort of vibe and color is what I'd place on those memories of childhood. I don't know. I love it.
To take the organization back, Tezzeret would work with Jace to fend the dragon off. However, Bolus far outclassed both Jace and Tezzeret and quickly sent them both running. The two planeswalkers would ultimately turn against one another and dueled, leading to Jace crushing his opponent's mind. But this, again, almost entirely went in Bolus's favor. It was actually an idea that Liliana had run by Bolus to convince Tezzeret to turn against him and try to take over the Consortium. She knew that he would need help, and that he would likely turn to Jace for this help. However, with their differing worldviews, they would likely come to battle each other, and this was Bolus's opportunity. Sure, after the fight, Tezzeret essentially was just an empty husk, but he was an empty husk with a planeswalker spark that Bolus now had complete freedom to manipulate. And with that, everything was in place for the conflux. With years of manipulation and constantly nudging the people of Alara's shards towards violence, a plane-wide war emerged and awakened obelisks of mana on each shard, which expanded the maelstrom. In the conflict, Bolus was approached by a planeswalker named Sarkhan Vol, and this man was immediately awestruck by the dragon. He even went so far as to say that it didn't seem like Bolus moved so much as the universe moved around him. Seeing such a great being before him, Sarkhan would swear his allegiance on the very spot, making a blood pact which gave him unimaginable power in exchange for his services in destroying the Esper obelisk. That said, this allegiance would become shaky when Bolus gifted Sarkhan with a flight of 5 dragons, one of which he had come across in the past, who was now a mindless shell of his former self. In the end, it wouldn't be Sarkhan who led to his downfall, though, but instead it was Ajani. The Leonin found himself in conflict with Bolus, but he immediately recognized he didn't stand a chance in a fair fight. And so he summoned the essence of Bolus's own soul to fight for him.
I swear I've seen this before, this image. Is it in Modern Horizons?
A perfect mirror who would battle Bolus to a standstill until they each landed a decisive bite on the other's neck and vanished in a flash of light. It was a truly Pyrrhic victory. On the one hand, Bolus had managed to harvest plenty of the Maelstrom's mana for himself, but on the other, he was still defeated and Ajani would become a permanent figure in his future plans. Bolus had been defeated for the second time in his life, and again it was by a mere mortal, something which truly began to eat at him. And this might be why he took a step back from things for a moment, and rather than going to Mirrodin himself, he would send Tezzeret to keep tabs on New Phyrexia. While he wasn't expected to actually stop the Phyrexian uprising, it was Tezzeret's job to delay things as much as possible while reporting everything he saw and heard to Bolus. The dragon believed that the Phyrexians were a chaotic plague, and while they hadn't come into contact yet, they would be destined to if both forces kept expanding their own influences. This is why he wanted Tezzeret to ensure that they couldn't travel between planes, and once this mission was complete, he would return to his master once again. But New Phyrexia wasn't the only plane with powerful entities on it. Zendikar had also piqued Bolus's interest. There, he began to study the Eye of Ugin, the prison created by his brother to steal away the Eldrazi Titans. In this,
Gotcha,
Bolus
Lugan.
found
Okay.
infinite potential, but he couldn't simply unleash them himself. That would leave him too involved and potentially in harm's way. So instead, he would eventually send Sarkon Vol to guard the Eye. At least this is what he told Sarkon. In actuality, he was setting the stage for the Planeswalker to open the Eye himself. In his last encounter with Ugin, Bolus had learned all about the Eldrazi and the seal which held them at bay,
Thanks
which
for telling me that
importantly
now.
meant that he knew
Not-
to unlock it, you would need
an hour
3
ago for me?
Planeswalkers and Ugin's Ghost Flame to be present before the Eye. Naturally, Sarkon would be the first. Second was Chandra Nalaar, who Bolus had set on a path to discover the Ghost Flame scroll. This would make her curious enough to eventually follow it back to its point of origin on Zendikar. And finally, Bolus would nudge Jace Beleren towards Zendikar as well. He, Chandra, and Sarkon would come into contact when they convened at the Eye, and it would only be a matter of time before Chandra was backed into a corner by Sarkon's dragon form and forced to use a Ghostfire spell. And suddenly, all the necessary components were present, and the Titans were unleashed. But how does this actually benefit Bolus? Well, he had learned of an ancient and powerful spell, the Elder Spell, which had the potential to ascend him to godhood once again. However, it required the sacrifice of many Planeswalker sparks, so he had hoped that the Titan's rampage would lure in other Planeswalkers, and then he could harvest their sparks. But this plan ultimately failed. In fact, it backfired. The Planeswalkers would form the Gatewatch together and defeat Ulamog and Kozilek on Zendikar before going to Innistrad, where they would once again seal away Emerald.
I love when this guy gets fucked over. I can't lie. You know what? God, I want to continue, but I'm really tired. So, we're going to hop back on this probably later tomorrow. Maybe we'll get like 48 minutes in. Yeah, I'm going to bed. Alright. Great stream. I mean, no, not really. It was alright. Okay video. I think it covers the basics fair enough. I feel like it would have taken me longer to do my own research, to be fair. But yeah, it does feel like it's missing a lot constantly, which I don't really like. But then I guess I could just probably fill that in by learning more about the lore later down the line. I might have read this in the wrong order, to be honest. But yeah, there's quite a bit to go through, and this guy's going to come back at some point. Man, I don't know. I'm cooked. Anyway, have a great day, evening, morning, night, whatever. Good night.